Right, we're back for part 2 of this. Obesogenic environments, which we'll discuss more later in the module. The word obesogenic means the promotion of excessive weight gain. The term obesogenic environment has been coined to refer to the influences that surroundings, opportunities or conditions of life have on promoting obesity in individuals and populations. There's a link there to Health Matters in the notes. A resource for local authorities and health professionals, linked through that image as well, which focuses on obesity and the food environment for some background. In the notes it says my interactive map of food outlets is included here. It isn't. I've just checked. It's not linking through, so I will probably add that later on. Okay, so how do we know about these things? How do you define them? And the key is something called indices of deprivation, or technically multiple indices of deprivation. Again, we'll look at this more later in the module. They measure relative levels of deprivation in 32,844 small areas or neighbourhoods called low super output areas. Again, more on this later. Some highlights are included here. You can have a read of them. Low super output areas are all more or less the same size across the country and have an average population about 1,500. I'll show you some maps of this a little bit later on. But some depressing stuff there from certain parts of the country. If you're really interested, this link will take you through an interactive map which allows you to look at all sorts of data in a reasonably intuitive way. We'll look at other ways in which we can do this later in the module. It's great, it has to be said, that these data are now freely available. Okay, adult life. Considering our rapid tour through this. Wider determinants of health. Now, I mentioned this earlier on in terms of the links to wider determinants and social determinants of health. They, broadly speaking, map onto each other. There are other ways of looking at it. And again, there's some. If you click on this, it'll take you through a resource which talks about Public Health England's rationale for this, but it's not that different to social determinants of health from people like Marmot. Alcohol is a key issue. We're not going to get through all of the issues. I'm just doing a fairly quick tour. Over the past century, the amount of alcohol consumed per person in the UK has fallen and risen repeatedly. Since reaching a peak in the mid-2000s, consumption has been falling steadily, especially among young people. Today, average consumption per adult is about 9.7 litres of pure alcohol per year, or about 18 units a week, which is more than recommended for many people, I suspect. And the proportion of people who don't drink is increasing, and this is especially true among young people. On the other hand, the heaviest drinkers, who are about 4% of the population, consume about 30% of the alcohol sold in the UK. Again, there's a link there to more information if you're interested. There is evidence that people are drinking more since the start of the pandemic. In September 2020, the Royal College of Psychiatrists estimated that in June of that year, more than 8.4 million people in England were drinking at higher risk levels, up from 4.8 million in February. And there is data from national statistics which supports this. Again, you can click on the article there for more background. This information was obvious from before the pandemic, but it'll be interesting to see what the effects are on these trends in the future. The main trend which people talk about most is the fact that younger people are tending to drink less, but little change for older groups. And again, the people who are drinking more in the pandemic do seem to be more in older age groups. Okay, so older adults. Right, okay, the information, the little image at the top is from a visualisation I put together about age distribution in the northeast. It's based on the last census, which is now 10 years old nearly. I'll probably update it when we get the new census. But the trends won't change that much. So, for example, if you were considering how many people who were aged over, shall we say, 90, about to myself, and 17,900 in the northeast region. Brought in, say, for example, wanted to compare that for some obscure reason to the youngest children. It brings that in, and you can see the differences in population. So this data needs updated. I might persuade some students to do this. These are based on different age groups, so if you wonder about them, the size of the bubbles gives you information on the size of the different age group. Okay, have a look at it if you're interested, and if anyone wants to volunteer to update it, feel free to let me know. I say it's a couple of years old, it's a few years old now, but the general situation should be still valid, and there's the information we had from the UK census and population pyramid we mentioned a bit earlier on. Obviously, it's very relevant in terms of older adults, particularly in the context of COVID. Okay, so bear with me a second. Yes, I mentioned disability-free life expectancy a little while ago, and this is its definition. The average number of years an individual is expected to live free of disability if current patterns of normality and disability continue to apply. And it notes that increases in life expectancy have outpaced improvements in DFLE. It is an issue because one of the things it means is that you can't work. So it's not just about mortality, it's about people living a healthy life as they get older as well. Back to the coronavirus. Since the beginning of the pandemic, it has been clear that older people are more likely to have more severe outcomes, as this chart of mortality starkly demonstrates. This is from Age UK. It's, as usual, it's linked through from the image. One interesting observation is the oldest youngest groups were least likely to be worried about the effect the coronavirus was having on their lives, although there were still significant levels of concern in all groups, including them. In the period 3rd of April, 10th of May 2020, more than 3/4 of people were worried, or were either very worried or somewhat worried the effect the coronavirus would have on their life. But again, those aged over 80 and those aged 16 to 29 were least likely to be worried, which I think is an interesting outcome. Yeah, just to wrap this up, another visualisation of the life course and possible impacts. This from UA and Solomon's. But again, it makes the point that it makes an interesting point actually. As we get older, risk accumulates, and I will talk about this a little bit later on in another lecture. Okay, that's all for this one. Thanks for listening.